tobacco smoking. But when you start smoking a pipe, you realize that it's pretty much the best way to enjoy tobacco. And I think cigars are a close second. I just think that the flavor, like the range of flavors and profiles, is a lot more narrow. You have, like, dark, medium, light, like that, I think that if you were going to make a comparison, and I think I may have said this to you, David, if you compare cigars to coffee, it's really easy to compare pipes to tea, in that there's a much wider range of flavors and styles. There's a lot more to explore, so pipes was natural for me in the beginning. I really enjoyed, the collector side of it. Pipes themselves. But when I was younger, it was a lot easier to try a bunch of different tobaccos, a lot more affordable to try a bunch of different tobaccos than it was to buy a new pipe every month or whatever. So around the same time, I was interested in beer, in whiskey. And I just started like tasting them, really deliberately and carefully. And I think all of those things are an acquired taste. So you really have to slow down. You really have to get used to it. And I think that with pipes, there's a much steeper learning curve in terms of technique than there is with whiskey or beer or any other food. So the flavors aren't challenging, but getting the best flavor is really challenging. And I think that even a lot of guys that have been smoking for a very long time, I think that when you hear somebody who's, let's say, used to smoking Latakia blends all the time, then they try a Virginia and they're like, oh, it didn't have any flavor. And, my tongue was burning and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, that's not the tobacco, it's your technique. And I'm not saying that to, throw anybody under the bus. If you've struggled with tobacco, I have all the time. I review stuff all the time that I don't get right away. And I have to try different packing methods, different pipes, and different times of the day, and different approaches. It's really easy for me to smoke a Virginia and immediately enjoy it because it's most of what I smoke. But when I go backwards and start to smoke things that I haven't smoked a ton over the last couple of years, there's always a little bit of reacclimation. So I think that when it comes to like the taste part of this, there's a couple of things that I would suggest to folks that made a big difference for me that I wish I would have heard earlier on, just in terms of flavor. We're not talking about picking out a pipe, picking out a tobacco, or any of that kind of stuff. But packing is huge. And I think that a lot of people overpack, and I think a lot of people over tamp. Honestly, you shouldn't be tamping hardly at all. If you're fidgeting with your pipe all the time and you're constantly applying pressure to even out the top of the tobacco, you are burning that more at a higher temperature than you should be. And along those lines, I had a good friend, a couple of guys, if any of you have ever done the Chicago show, you'll know a guy named Coffee David. And Coffee David is a legendary hospitality specialist. It's like the only thing I can think of to call him. And he is responsible for making Cuban coffee for everybody at the hotel. And it's like totally an unofficial thing, but everybody goes there. It's like where I first met Lars Everson, was sitting in his room when I was at the show like 10 years ago or so. It was my first year. And anyway, so we were all sitting around one night. I'll try to make this a long story short here. We were all sitting around one night, and David, who has been doing this for decades, he asked me, and actually Jeremy Reeves was there too, of Cornell and Deal, and he said, hey, let me see your pipe. And we were like, yeah, sure. Hand him the pipe that we were smoking. And he kind of, he's looking at it and kind of goes like this and puts his hand on it. And, okay, all right, let me see your pipe. And take the other pipe, do the same thing, look at it, put his hands on it, okay. And he was like, you're smoking too hot and you're almost perfect. And we were like, what are you talking about? He was like, honestly, if you can feel any warmth at all on the outside of your pipe, it's too hot. Like, just straight up. Any warmth at all is too much. And I was like, oh, come on, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, there's always a little bit of warmth. And he was like, nope, handed me his pipe. Honestly, tons of smoke coming out of it, and barely any warmth at all, if any, like no more than my body heat, So I took that to heart, and that was a long time ago. And now all the time, I tell myself that if I start to feel any significant heat, I put the pipe down and come back to it in a couple minutes. And that takes discipline. And it's just like all of us, I'm sure, struggled with keeping the bowl lit when we all started out. Keeping it cool is a whole nother step there. And honestly, the cooler it is and the less heat that you have going, the more it's going to be easier for you to pick up those nuanced flavors. So that's one thing. Smoke as cool as you possibly can. And the other thing I would say is you have to retrohale. You were talking about having a good sense of smell, David. Honestly, smell is like 80-90% of taste. It's so much of it that when I have even a little bit of a head cold, I just don't smoke until I feel completely better, because for me, it's less about the nicotine and more about the ritual and like the flavors and stuff. So I have no problem going a week or two without any nicotine. I'm usually ready for a pipe after that for sure, but It doesn't really phase me. And I just don't enjoy this unless I can taste everything. If it tastes off or if it's not enjoyable, then I don't do it. Same thing with a cigar. I won't smoke a cigar to the nub, hardly ever, because as soon as it starts to taste bad, I just put it out. It's, yes, you could be thinking about it from like a money waste kind of a thing. But if you're paying 10 or 8, 10, 12, even $15 for a cigar and you get an hour out of it, I mean, that's a great value in my opinion for a quality smoke. And I would rather remember it at a high point than keep smoking for another 20 or 30 minutes and have it just be a soggy mess. So I think slowing down, I think trying to force yourself to smoke to the bottom of the bowl, trying to force yourself to go beyond the point that you're enjoying it, all of these things, they don't get you anything, honestly. Like, just be fine with losing a couple pennies every now and then to the dottle at the bottom of your pipe, because it's almost never going to taste that good. And to each his own, but personally, I think that that's part of the reason I smoke smaller pipes all the time, because I would rather smoke 2 or 3 pipes in a row than one giant pipe that's going to burn for 2 or 3 hours, because halfway through that bowl, you're smoking filter at that point. You know what I mean? So, I mean, if that's what you like and if you enjoy it and if you have good success with smoking large pipes and smoking for 3 hours the same bowl of tobacco, then awesome. That's totally great. But me personally, I found that no matter how hard I try, a chamber more than about 1.5 inches deep, I just never enjoy the last third of it. So I think that aside from trying to slow down and smoke as cool as you can, making sure that you're retrohaling so that you get the full aroma of what you're smoking. Other than that, try not to get caught up in the technique and all the advice out there on the right way to do things. Find something that works for you and stick to it and chase that, because even if you do things 100 times the same way, there's going to be a certain percentage that's a fail rate there, and you just don't have a good smoke. Stars didn't align, and there's nothing you can do about it. But it's not the kind of thing that you sort of master and get right every single time. And so much of it depends on your mood, what you ate that day, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's so many factors here. That's what makes it fun, but it also is what makes it frustrating at times. So
Hey
kind of a
Shane.
long answer there.
Hey Shane, Steven from New Jersey. Thanks again for coming here. Quick, a couple
Yeah,
questions for you, but
sure.
I'll do one out for to start. This came up a bit earlier on the Zoom today. I had gotten some squadron leader not too long ago, and noticed it was really, really, really moist
Yeah.
upon opening the bag. Like, what is like a good technique, if there is a technique? And I'm only 2 years into this, so to like let it dry. Like, what's the like appropriate like method, if there is one, or can you give us like a brief on that?
A lot of guys do like just a paper towel or a piece of paper or something like that. Take enough out for a bowl, sprinkle it, break it up a little bit if it's a little on the chunky side or like a rubbed out flake, and then just let it sit for a couple minutes. The thing that I would say here is, personally, I think that it's worth investing in. You see some of those like expensive tobacco plates and stuff that are like handmade out of wood or whatever. And I actually have a couple of those laying around because they really are useful. I used to just use a paper towel. The thing that people don't realize about a paper towel or a piece of white paper is that it's actually going to absorb moisture pretty quickly. So I use this. This is just like a little porcelain plate that actually me and Aaron's mutual friend Ryota in Japan gave to me a while back. And I use that because it doesn't actually pull anything out of the tobacco. It's literally just air drying. And the other thing that I would say is, really, like, Sam Gawith might be one of the brands that's an exception to this rule, but in most cases 5 to 10 to 15 minutes is plenty of dry time. You hear guys drying stuff overnight and for 2-3 hours at a time, and like I said, if that's what works for you, then great. And I will say that I used to dry my tobacco to a point where it was almost crispy, and I just realized, like, in the last couple of years, that pretty close to the moisture level out of the tin is actually what you want. So I do about 5 minutes, depending on how springy it feels in my hand. And forgive me if this is something that you already are aware of, Stephen, but when you have a tobacco, one easy thing to do, and I only have a couple crumbs here, but if you press it together and you watch it kind of unfurl, if it takes a really long time for it to like separate, then it's probably too moist. If it just has a nice even spring to it, then it's about perfect. And if it just crumbles right away, then it's too dry. So that's like a pretty good way to judge it. But honestly, that's another one of those things. Like, I could sit here and be like, this is 68% humidity, and I have my best smokes between 62% and 64%. But honestly, feel is everything, and where you're at. It's actually relatively low humidity here right now in South Carolina, and it's probably still in the 70% range for humidity. So when I'm like in Vegas or like back home in California, it's a lot different. I honestly don't even dry my tobacco at all because I find that about halfway through the bowl, it's really, really dry. Um, but yeah, over here right now, actually, it's lower than that. I was wrong. It's about 40% humidity, which explains why this is smoking a little hot for me. But the point is, just feel it, just try it at a bunch of different. When you get to know a tin, that's the thing is you're smoking how many bowls out of a 2-ounce tin. Typically, there was an old Rat Race catalog that Charles Rattray said this himself. Typically, the last couple of bowls of your tin or pound of tobacco are going to be the best because it'll be at the right humidity and because you'll have gotten a good feel for it. So just smoke it and try it.
Awesome. Thank you.
And guys, go ahead and just jump in. Stephen asked if he could just go ahead and jump in, and I think just don't hold back.
Yeah.
Shane,
Shane.
I have to. Oh, wait. I'll let the other gentleman go first.
No, Bart, go first. Bart, go first. I'll speak after you.
Okay, Gideon, thanks. I actually have 2 questions. That's why I wanted to let you go first, but hey.
No, go ahead.
I'm a very novice pipe smoker, and I've noticed I have some experience with cigars and other forms of tobacco like you. I've been smoking for many years, but pipes is very new to me, just a few months.
Mhm.
And I'm really trying to find tobacco that has a friendly character. Let's say I got some nightcap from a friend of mine, and even though I really love the very smoky Latakia and that stuff, it's just a bit too much of the good stuff. It's like an overproof whiskey for somebody that's used to be drinking beer. I do like
Very true.
it's just too much for me. And I'm looking for something that's naturally sweet, not like an aromatic, but just something that's, you know, that has a nice, sweet, very kind of flavor profile. Something that I think the advanced pipe smoker would smoke in the morning, like when he gets up, you have your cup of coffee, that kind of stuff. Just to start your day. Looking for a tobacco like that. I'm thinking I'm looking at Virginias, but I'm not sure. And I heard you say I smoke primarily Virginias, or just really enjoy smoking Virginias. Can you give me some advice in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think especially, again, I think Virginia's are a really good place to start. A lot of people aromatic tobaccos when they're inning, and the trouble with that is that it actually requires a pretty good amount of technique and knowledge and experience to like really get the flavor out of it that you're going to. That's why you hear so many people saying that it smells great in the tin or in the bag, and then when I smoke it, it's like almost nothing, nondescript or whatever. Especially because they tend to have high nicotine, typically lower nicotine. When you have that, a cigarette smoker, you're puffing and puffing because you're not really getting anything, and you're not getting much flavor. Lighter Englishes, pipe nightcap, good one if you do primarily being a little bit more Turkish, and Turkish typically lower in nicotine content. But it is going to be a little sweeter and a little more citrusy than the nightcap would be. Other than that, honestly, Orlik Golden Sliced is a classic, and it's a classic for a reason. Most of the best pipe makers in the world, including Tom Eltang, pretty much exclusively smoke Orlik. And one reason is that all the Danish guys, you can find Orlik in the convenience stores, gas stations, groceries, which is nice. That's several times when I've been working ran out of tobacco, and you can find anywhere Orlik, which is amazing. It is naturally sweet. It does topping, but it's not overpowering, not an aromatic by any stretch. It's got an aroma. I company most mind the smell of Orlik. And honestly, for me, it's like a perfect medium strength. I could smoke it all day. It ages really well too. But if you want to get a good feel for Virginias in general, it's a great place to start because you can kind of you can back off and go to like Capstan Yellow, Peter Stokkebye Navy Flake, something a little lighter, or you can try a Scudo. You can try some of the darker stoved, heavier stuff with a lot of Perique in it. But Orlik is kind of a great place to start. I would say Orlik and a Scudo are the 2 best places to start for a Virginia smoker.
How do I spell Orlik?
O-R-I-L. Oh yeah, it's O-R-L-I-K, no C.
Orlik. Okay, thanks. I'll definitely give that a shot because I have an outstanding order for by part squadron leader, which they couldn't get me, so they asked me if I wanted something else. I add that to the order.
Yeah, and it's also like honestly, it's a really affordable tobacco too. 100 grams is like what, 14, 15 bucks, something like that. It's maybe even less. I can't remember.
I live in Europe, so I'm horribly taxed by law buy all the tobacco I buy. Like tobacco is pretty expensive here.
Sure,
Which
sure.
leads me
Where in
to my
Europe are you?
the Netherlands, and we just
In the
got a
Netherlands?
price raise in the 1st of April, meaning that all tobacco is basically being priced about 25% higher than it was before. So where a
Okay.
tin would normally cost like 13 or 14 euros, it's now costing 17 or 18.
Well,
I
will say that,
actually
Uh,
live. Well, I'm originally from Spain. We met at Milltown, but I live here in Kentucky. If you can buy those from Spain, for some reason they're like, I'm gonna say 20% cheaper than anywhere else.
Yeah, I know.
Capstan is about $7, just to give you the
Mhm.
cheapest one. And you can order those ones online from there, and they
Yeah,
get
the problem is the customs will take it because basically buying tobacco from abroad, they see it as a form of tax evasion. They're
Mhm.
basically telling you we tax this product in a different way than the country you're buying it, therefore you are circumventing our tax system, so it's tax evasion. And they won't prosecute you
I
in any
actually
horrible
been
ways, but
I actually been mailing over 20 times to my friends in Spain and other places in South America. If you do it as a friend, sorry, smoking pipes.
no, yeah, sure.
Uh, if you buy yourself for them, or they pay it online, but they send it to your house if you have friends in the States, then they can mail it to you. And normally customs never get it.
Yeah,
That's-
that's what I was
true.
going to
That's
ask
true.
about that. If you can, if you've got a
One and a
friend,
half kilos. If you
Yeah,
do that,
you're allowed to do it from person to person,
yeah,
up to a certain amount. The other thing
That's
I'll
what
say is that if you're in the Netherlands, every single airport in anywhere around the Scandinavian countries that I've been has had Orlik in the duty free shops. Like every one of them, you can get like 250 gram tins of it for like, I don't even know, 30 euros or something. It's pretty affordable.
I'm definitely gonna try it. So thank you a lot for that advice, and I'll let you know how I like it, Shane.
Cool. You
I
said
have
you had
one
another
more.
question too?
Yeah, one more. I actually shop a lot at smokingpipes.eu, the one in Ireland, and I was
Great.
wondering what your affiliation is with this shop, because their customer service is unlike anything I've ever seen. I work in customer service, not in the customer service myself, but I'm a manager at a company that provides this kind of customer service, and the level of quality of how they handle stuff is insane. And that's why I wonder what kind of affiliation you have with them, because if you know anybody there, I've told them, but let them know that it's exceptional what they're doing.
That's great to hear, and I will tell them. I mean, we're the same company, so we started smokingpipes.eu. Oh gosh, I think it was coming up on 2 years ago. I think it's been officially open for a little over a year, but the project started about 2 years ago. And yeah, they're the same company. So Adam and Hannah, two of the people that work there, used to work. Hannah used to work for me in the U.S. and Adam used to work for our marketing department, and they just moved over there. So I know Frederica very well. All the other people at that office. I actually buy the pipes for their website as well. So when I'm buying pipes for the U.S., I buy pipes for both websites. So
Awesome.
we're very closely affiliated. But yeah, I'm really glad to hear that, and I will let them know.
Please do, because it's really exceptional, and I'm not just saying that to get on your good side, but it's really something else. I was very impressed by that service.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. And honestly, I'm not surprised. They're great folks.
yeah, Shane, I'd like to comment on that too. I've had the exact same experience ordering over stateside, and I really appreciate that. I recently moved and sent in an order to you guys. I had the wrong address in, and I called in, and in under 10 minutes, like first I sent an email, and I was kind of worried that, oh no, maybe I should call him to make sure that everything goes correctly. But as soon as I called in, whoever I was speaking with, somebody in the background was like, oh yeah, we already dealt with that. And it was 10 minutes from when I ordered. I'm really impressed with you guys, and I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Thanks so much, Jake. Yeah, I'm responsible for the customer service department at Smoking Pipes as well, and it's an incredible team. I love those guys so much, and they've been doing an amazing job working from home for nearly 2 months now. So it's been really nice to see that we haven't really had to sacrifice in the way of like our customers' experience or even shipping orders same day in most cases. So I'm really proud of the whole team for sure. But yeah, my customer service guys, I'll definitely let them know that you said that, because they love to hear that kind of feedback as well. They really care. Hey, Cliff, didn't see you were there. What's going on, man? What are you smoking?
Actually, I had a question. When is Smoking Pipes going to start accepting deposit?
Gonna start accepting what?
Direct deposit.
Direct deposit. I mean, we could probably whip up something custom for you. That's no problem. I'll call the developers right now. What pipe is that, Cliff?
This is that bang of chips.
Oh yeah, the little Rodi. That's an amazing pipe.
Yeah,
That's an amazing pipe.
Just because it belonged to Chip.
Yeah, smokes well too.
Oh yeah.
Well, just between us, because we both knew him well, I think that when we refurbished that for you, it was probably the first time that pipe had been cleaned, maybe ever. So I'm glad to hear it's smoking well.
Gideon, why don't you go ahead and jump in, man?
And I picked this beauty up from you guys.
That's a basic, an Elting basic.
I just got it yesterday, and I can't wait to light it up. I just walked in the house, and I'm going to do it.
Awesome, awesome. What are you going to smoke in it for the first time?
Yeah, I was listening to you guys driving home. I'm going to do the Orly.
Nice, nice. I mean, that's the Tom Elting magic combination right there.
Yeah, that was from last week's show.
Absolutely. The basics are amazing. They're so good. I have 3 of them, I think. I just kind of leave them around everywhere, and whenever I need something that I can smoke for about an hour and a half, it's perfect.
Shane.
Yeah, you guys are great.
Shane, I have a question for you.
Yes, I'm trying to cycle through here.
Yes. A friend bought a pipe, smoking pipes, a Peterson, but the pipe came with a crank on the bowl inside. Okay, it's very rare because I haven't a problem with any of my Petersons.
Yeah.
But this friend put in another group of Facebook, and some people are very. It's very rare that it happens because you have a very quality control. That you bought. But, what do you think could happen with this pipe? It's not a crack on the carbon. It's a crack on the briar inside.
Did he contact us already? Because we would take it back. No problem.
I tell him. Okay. But it's very rare because you have a great control quality.
Yes, I mean, I think that we've published several times, like kind of the process for that.
What could happen with this pipe?
I mean,
it's very
honestly,
rare.
It's very rare. I would say at smokingpipes.com, not just the Peterson factory, but just at smokingpipes.com. We're talking about less than 1%.
But Peterson is the control of Laudisi.
Yeah, of course. But when you're talking about, like, I'm just going to make up some numbers here, just for the sake of the argument. When you're talking about, let's say, somewhere between 60 and 80,000 pipes a year coming from a factory, and most of these factories have less than 20 employees. Back in the day, they would have had dozens and dozens of people. They would have been making millions of pipes a year. But now you're talking about tens of thousands of pipes, probably somewhere between 50 and 80, like I said, 60 and 80. When you have a half dozen people that are responsible for checking all of those, there's just a certain amount of natural human error rate that you cannot really completely eliminate. Now, the part about your friend receiving one that's cracked is really upsetting to me, because not only did we miss that at the factory, but we missed it at Smoking Pipes as well. And again, it does happen. I can tell you that the number of pipes.
It's a birthday part gift. he's pissing, but it happens. I know
it's basically a freak accident, and it's really unfortunate when it does happen to folks. But like I said, regardless of whether there's something actually wrong with the pipe, we give you 30 days to return it, no questions asked, as long as you haven't smoked it. Just because you kind of have to feel something in your hand sometimes to be sure that you want it. Like, we can give you measurements, we can give you pictures, but sometimes you get a pipe and you're like, oh, you know what, this is just a little bigger than I expected, or whatever. So if it hasn't been smoked, you can always return it. if you have
Saying, I know
smoked
you,
it,
sorry for interrupting, but I know they sometimes in South America, like Ecuador, where Alfredo is from, they have problems
Yes.
with sometimes it takes about 3 months to get it. And not because of you guys, because I mail a lot of tobacco to friends in Argentina, Chile, or Uruguay. So they
you're
can
gonna-
from the United States into, let's say, Chile within
Yeah.
2 weeks.
I
Once
never
they are
in-
inside, hold on, Alfredo. But once
Mhm.
once they are inside their customs and blah blah blah, it takes 2 months. So it,
Oh yeah,
it
of course.
goes over 30 days.
Yeah, of course. Honestly, we're not gonna, but that's the thing is we have the tracking information. If we know that you didn't receive it for 2 months, we're not gonna say that you can't return it because it's already been more than 30 days. So that's
the problem,
that's
the
thing,
problem,
like,
the problem from to here is the customs and the shipping costs.
Yeah.
I only use friends at US when I buy smoking pipe or cigars and the other sites. I send this to my friends on Florida, New York, and they came to my country and put the things here. I never bought direct to the company at the US because it's very complicated. The customs and the costs are very big with the shipping.
yeah, sure, I understand.
It's complicated.
But
Here in South America, a little quantity of people smoke pipe. Here in my country, in my city, I think that 10 or 20 or 30 people only smoke pipes. It's a very little ghetto.
Sure, sure. But like I said, I mean, if you are an international customer and it takes 2 months to get your order and you're not happy with the pipe and you want to return it, we're not going to say no to that. We can work it out for sure. But what I was going to say is that's just if you're not happy with the pipe, right? But if there's an actual problem, like a crack in the bowl, then we warranty the pipe for up to a year of any defect, and that's outside of our normal return policy. So you're never going to have a problem returning a pipe that had a crack or something else that we missed.
I tell to my friend this information. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Hey Shane, we have a question came through on the chat.
Yeah.
About tamping, and just wanted to sort of like follow up on the comment that you made earlier about, you know, you shouldn't be tamping that much, or perhaps people over tamp.
Yeah.
But Terry says that then he has a trouble keeping the pipe lit. You want to maybe comment on that?
So if you're not tamping that much and you're having trouble keeping the pipe lit, you probably need to pack a little bit tighter, but be careful not to pack too tight. The thing about over tamping, I don't think it's necessarily how much you tamp, like how often, and like the pressure that you're using. So I recommend to a lot of people to start to actually use their fingertip, because when you get accustomed to using your fingertip, and see, I've been smoking this for a little while, but honestly, I'm not putting any pressure here. I'm just leveling out the ash, the tobacco that's already smoked. And when you get used to using your fingertip, you find that you have to do it lightly, otherwise you'll burn yourself, right? So then you start to understand sort of the amount of pressure or lack thereof that's necessary to tamp your bowl. So I tamp, I don't know, I would say on average probably 3 or 4 times throughout the course of a bowl. It's usually like in thirds or fourths, just to keep it going. And like I said, this is a wood tamper. So I think that a really heavy, like, you know, pewter, pot metal, like really big glass or stone or whatever, stuff like that is okay. But I think it's really important that you kind of learn how to tamp using something really lightweight, because honestly, you should not have to do more than just let the tampers weight. And in this case, that's very little, do the work for you. So when I say that people are tamping too much, some of it is that if you're constantly trying to make your ash perfect, yes, you're tinkering with the pipe too much, and that can cause a lot of things to go wrong or to be frustrating. But really, it's the pressure that you're using. You really shouldn't use much at all. It should be enough with your finger that you can actually barely feel the ash underneath the pad of your finger. And when you transfer to a tool, it should be about the same amount of pressure.
Shane, I'm curious. So I've seen your YouTube, the different shows, the Mystery Tobacco Theater 2000, I like to call it. And you've got quite a nice group of guys that you work with and get on camera with. And it seems, I could be wrong about this, that they have different levels of experience with pipe smoking and tobaccos and whatnot. Do you train them? Do you like do some mentoring on it, or are you just like, okay guys, start smoking and figure it out?
There's a certain amount. I mean, we definitely have mentored several people that have come in to the office like without any experience pipe smoking. Like our IT guy, Mike Flanagan, is a good example. Like he was not a pipe smoker at all. And over the last several years, he's built up a pretty extensive cellar and a pretty good collection of pipes, a lot of high end stuff too. And has become a full fledged regular pipe smoker. So it does happen just through osmosis, I guess. But most of the guys in the videos, just specifically those guys, Jeremy Reeves obviously was already a pipe smoker and a cigar guy for many years before he came to us, and then came to Cornell and Deal. And Truett Smith is a good example. He's our lead copywriter. Truett was a pipe smoker before we hired him as well. So he smoked a pipe all through college and when he was studying abroad in Europe a couple years earlier. Like I said, I think he's grown a lot as a pipe smoker because it's kind of hard not to when you come spend all your time in the smoking pipes office where we can smoke anywhere and where everybody has a pretty amazing collection of tobaccos and stuff. So those guys have definitely grown over the last couple years as pipe smokers, but most of them came to us with a certain amount of experience for sure. I think that mentor-wise, if you could call it that, I tend to give guys a lot more advice on adding pipes to their collection than on smoking. We tried different tobaccos, like, hey, have you tried this? Or I opened a really old tin of this. So we definitely share those and talk about what we're tasting. But mostly when we're actually talking to each other, it's about adding pipes to our collection and like what we want, what we're looking for. Do I have to have this pipe? That kind of stuff.
Shane, sorry if I missed it. What pipe are you smoking today? I came in a little late.
This is a former rusticated apple. It's kind of like his little signature. Tom Elting has his poker and Former has his apple. This is a pipe that I kind of always have with me. It's in my bag, I think 100% of the time. Great pipe. I'm a big fan of Formers. I probably have 15, 16 of his pipes, something like that. And for one carver in my collection, that's quite a bit actually. So really love it. I actually have like 5 apples of his, the rusticated one and a couple of a sandblasted one and a couple of smooths. So honestly, just about the perfect pipe for me, perfect size, perfect weight. And it's kind of nice that it's durable too.
I've been smoking a pipe for about 32 years now, and I've just started to get into smaller pipes. I picked up a Mike Couch. He's a custom pipe maker in the States, and he made me a Devil Anzi.
Oh yeah.
And I can't put that pipe down. It's one of the best smoking pipes I've ever had, and it's so light.
Yeah, lightweight, handy. It's not like something you have to kind of watch when you're walking around. I don't know if you're a clencher,
Right.
but for me, it's handy to have something that's out of the way and kind of small. I mean, I am a huge fan of small pipes, and I preach the small pipe narrative quite a bit. But like I said, I've never had, like especially in this pipe, for example, I've never had a bowl where I wasn't able to smoke to the bottom with the same kind of consistency of flavor as when I was halfway through it.
Right.
Just because it's not that big of a chamber, and if I feel like I didn't get enough, I'll just light it up again.
Yeah, exactly. And you can have 2 or 3 small pipes, in an hour and a half. So
Absolutely. So like maybe having small pipes causes me, because I also do smoke quite a bit. So I think maybe it means that my rotation for the week tends to be more than 7 pipes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I also have no problem smoking a pipe 3 or 4 times in a day and then not smoking it for a week or 2. I've never really had any issues with sourness or anything like that.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a question for you. Since you have a big collection of pipes and tobacco cellar, are you more pro pipes, more pro tobacco? What's the combination there?
It's changed a lot throughout. So I started smoking when I was 18, and I'm 32 now. So in the beginning, I was much more interested in tobaccos because the world of tobaccos was so large, and I was exploring it still. And also, like I said, it was a lot easier to go and spend, $30 or $40 a paycheck and try 2 or 3 different types of tobacco. than it was to buy a pipe all the time. And then I would say that a little bit later on, when I kind of had a good idea of what I like to smoke, is when I really started working on my collection of pipes. And part of that is because I started to have a better idea of like the size of pipe and the shape that I liked and a couple of makers that I was interested in. So that took some serious time to kind of establish these sort of rules for myself in terms of collecting. And I also do, I mean, just like I'm sure a lot of you, I trade pipes back, if I smoke a pipe off and on for 6 months to a year and it never becomes like a really a favorite of mine, there's probably nothing wrong with it, but it was meant to be in somebody else's collection. It was meant to be enjoyed by somebody else. So I have gotten rid of or traded out or swapped pipes many more than I have now. And I've just started to kind of keep the ones that I can't live without, like really can't imagine living without. And over the years, that still ends up being a pretty high number of pipes. But I also think that at a certain point, there's pipes that I have because I need that pipe in my collection. It's the right shape, it's the right size. It's an example of a shape from a certain carver that I want to own. And that doesn't mean that I won't smoke it, but I have pipes like this, like the one I'm smoking now, that are like everyday workhorses. And then I have pipes that are sort of like centerpieces in my collection. And I may smoke them also, but I probably don't have them in my briefcase rolling around when I'm traveling all over the world. You know what I mean? So these days, I am absolutely more of a pipe collector than a tobacco collector. Part of that is because I have enough tobacco to last me, I don't know, 20 years, maybe more. So there's certain tobaccos that I'm always on the hunt for older tins. In fact, I actually just opened for the meeting today. This is like a 20-year-old tin of McConnell's Red Virginia. And yeah, I bought that maybe 3 or 4 years ago when it was already pretty old. So now when I'm at the pipe shows or even like, looking at Pipe Stud's website, mostly I'm buying aged tobacco because I have a lot of stuff between 2 and 10 years old already aging in the cellar. So it's rare these days that I go tobacco shopping except for vintage tins, but I'm kind of always pipe shopping. So
I'm gonna take the opportunity to do a shameless plug for something I just threw out there as an experiment in the virtual pipe club page. I tried, actually, we've got started a pipe swap. So you guys can take advantage of this whole idea. Like if you've got some pipes that you want to let go of and look for maybe something else that is something new to you, put it on the Facebook group page. So Kyle and I have done a swap, and Bart and I have done a swap, and who else did I do a swap with?
DDR, your package just arrived in the US today, so you should be getting it really soon. And I've did a second trade with another fella from the group, so I'm really digging the concept. It's working out great.
It's worth a try to see if we can get some enjoyment out of that. But I wanted to plug that so that we have, maybe a little bit more awareness amongst the group here that that's something that we're trying out.
Very cool.
Yeah. Shane,
that's a nice spigot, Tim.
I was going to ask a question.
Dracula spigot.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm a big Peterson fan, and I have to say, Shane, I really appreciated all the stuff that Smoking Pipes is doing with the Peterson line now, and that you bought the factory. I think you're doing some really cool things, and I hope you continue.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fun. There's a lot of cool stuff coming, but obviously right now the factory's been closed for a couple of weeks, so I think maybe the timeline on some of that new stuff might be a little messed with, but you'll still see some cool things happening for the rest of the year for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering on the Peterson thing. I bought a Peterson 1910 Peterson house pipe patent, and it has on the silver ferrule. It has a crack in it. I knew that before I bought it. I figured I'd get it fixed somehow. I had emailed Glenn over it at the factory, and he said they really couldn't, put on a brand new one with the the 1910 hallmark, but they could put on.
Yeah, you can't.
Do you know anybody or have anybody down at Smoking Pipes who's like knows a jeweler who could weld it and put in, I think it can be fixed by a jeweler, back to literally, brand new almost.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't. I know a handful of really good repairmen that we recommend to, because we don't do repairs like except for pipes that we have already purchased as an estate that need some work, you know. So we don't do that service. So we typically refer people to repairmen that we trust. But honestly, as far as repairing a band instead of replacing a band, I do not believe that anybody that I'm familiar with is able to do that. I would just look for a local silversmith of some kind. I mean, even a high-end pipe maker that knows how to work silver very well might be willing to do it for you, but it's going to cost a good amount of money for sure. Because I think they could remove the band and rehammer it and resolder it, like you said. But if you do that and you try to keep the hallmarks preserved, it takes some skill for sure. So unfortunately, I don't have anybody that I could recommend, but I would just try to find some silversmith locally, or even if maybe there's a pipe maker locally that knows how to work silver and doesn't just take a band that's already made and glue it on a pipe, then that's your best bet for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Retain the hallmarks is very complicated with the silver, because they have to make it's complicated.
Yeah, and depending on where the crack is,
you can change the silver band, but without any hallmark.
If the hallmark is close to the crack, it's going to be almost impossible.
No, can you see the crack?
Let's see. Hold on. Yeah.
It's nowhere. The crack is nowhere near the silver.
Well, that's a good thing.
It's nowhere near the hallmark. It's on the other side.
Whereabouts in the country are you located, Tim?
I'm up in Haverhill, Mass. I mean, I've been checking around the silversmiths, and I did find somebody who could fix it. It's going to cost a decent amount of money, though, which I don't mind doing it, because I love the pipe. I wanted to have the pipe, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say that even a couple pipe makers that I'm thinking of that might be able to do it for you, you're looking at well more than you paid for the pipe, I'm sure, to have it fixed.
Yeah, well, that's okay. It's a collector, so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Shane, I have a question for you around the way that pipes or tobaccos are reviewed. And I'm sure everybody's sort of familiar with the typical language that pipe reviewers use, like this.
Sure.
This tobacco smells of fruit, or there's this thing. So first of all, are there like really common words that people are using, and what are they referring to, and or is it just all BS? like you know?
No, I don't think it's BS. I try to. So the one thing, especially the reviews that I do on smokingpipes.com, you'll find that I don't really score anything. I think that to a certain extent, now we did have a guideline for scoring the cigars that we did for our top 10 cigars of 2019. But you kind of have to do that if you have more than one participant in the review, so that we can actually rate them. But if I'm just reviewing the tobacco, I almost never score it. Even on tobaccoreviews.com or on the website where you can actually like put the star rating. Typically, if I'm going through the trouble of reviewing something, it's going to be a 4 to a 5 out of 5. So that's something I feel really strongly about. And I think that generally the score thing is like so subjective that it kind of doesn't matter. You start to see, let's just say cigar aficionado, right? You see so many cigars that are a 92 and a 94 and a 93. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, out of 100, and it stands to reason that the best of the best in the industry would be all, A- to A+, right? But the scores are so subjective and it doesn't really mean all that much. My point is that, like, when everything that you're reviewing is good quality, and when everything that you're reviewing is in your personal wheelhouse, like, I could tell you, like, man, this one for me is a 3.75 and this one for me is a 3.6. Like, that doesn't mean anything to you. That's my point. So if there's a rating system that you find for yourself that's helpful to keep track of stuff, that's great. But if you're talking about reviewing a tobacco such that you want other people to have an idea of what it's like, in my opinion, the best things that you can do is compare it to other things that are well known and that people may have tried, and pick out a handful of flavors that make sense and that are sort of commonly occurring in the thing that you're discussing. So, you know, whiskey, you hear a lot about oakiness, you hear a lot about vanilla and stuff like that. Pipe tobacco, we talk about earthiness, spiciness, sweetness. There's tangy sort of sweetness. There's dry sweetness. There's citrus notes. There's leather. You know, that's a really common one. Now, it sounds repetitive when you review a bunch of tobaccos because how can everything be leathery and kind of spicy and, you know, whatever. And that's because, I mean, you know, 2% Perique, 4% Perique, it's not going to magically start tasting like spaghetti. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking about levels of spice and the way that that level of spice interacts with the rest of the tobacco, which might be a little citrusy or might be a little woody. So it sounds like you're saying the same thing over and over and over again, and you kind of are. And that's because there's only so much that a handful of components of tobacco can combine and give you flavor-wise. But yeah, I think that some of the most common ones, and you see this in like whiskey tasting things too. You see like charts where they have like infographics where this side of the spectrum tastes like this and this side of the spectrum tastes like that. It's meant to give you a frame of reference and not necessarily the exact experience. When I was reviewing stuff personally and not necessarily on the Smoking Pipes blog or YouTube channel, one thing that I found helpful when I was like making notes for myself, and if you go back and find some of my old tobacco reviews from 10 years ago, you'll see some of that too, because I think they're all still up. I picked out something that was highly personal to me. So I would have a general, like, here's what I feel like, you know, in terms of mild, medium, and strong in nicotine and in flavor. Here's what I feel like it relates to. Like, oh, this reminds me of a Scudo a little bit. It reminds me of Squadron Leader a little bit. And then the other thing that I would do is something very specific. And sometimes that could be like, I think one of the reasons that I love Virginias, and I've talked to other guys that love Virginias for the same kind of reasons. It's like, you know, there's people that think gasoline smells good. There's people that think like freshly mowed grass smells good. And I had a moment many, many years ago where I realized that what I was smoking, the retrohale reminded me a bit of when I used to like mow the lawn and then like sit on the like stone ledge and like eat watermelon after that, and like that like melon rind and like freshly cut grass kind of thing just like triggered something for me when I was smoking this blend. And now I wouldn't include that in the Smoking Pipes review because nobody remembers being a 5-year-old kid at my house in California on that day. You know what I mean? It's like highly personal. But I think that there are flavors like that you can pick up, stuff that just triggers a certain memory, a certain dish, you know, a certain other tobacco, a whiskey, a coffee, whatever. So when I'm taking notes for myself, I typically try to include something like that because those are some of the most powerful olfactory and taste memories that I can relate to, that elicit an emotional response from me. And then of course there's the general, like, this is slightly spicy and a little peppery and a little fruity and a little citrusy.
I'm wondering if, because we run into this with other kinds of tasting, tea tasting and wine tasting and whatnot, that when there's a common reviewing terminology like bready or earthy or something like that, that there's another word that non-aficionados might relate to better. Like, so, I mean, when you say bready,
like dirt,
like dirt, or like stick
soil
your nose in a bag of sourdough bread, and that's what we mean by bready. I mean, like, it's like, does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing is, like, you know, those general terms like bready can apply to a lot of different stuff. But I know that there have been times on the Smoking Pipes YouTube channel where I've said something reminded me of sourdough and where I've said something reminded me of like marbled rye. So there's like, there are times where you get really specific. Also, I try to do that for nuttiness. So like nuttiness, I sometimes throw that out there as like a buzzword, you know, like kind of a catch-all. But I try to explain the difference between, like, you know, pistachio and cashew and walnut or whatever, like, because there is a different spectrum of all of these flavors. So I try to do that specifically when I can. And then again, like, you know, just an overall like quality that is kind of a toasted nutty quality. Sometimes you can't really drill down farther than that. But yeah, I think that earthy is a hard one because there are lots of foods that we eat that have earthy notes to them, and then there's lots of stuff that you've never tasted in your life, or at least not on purpose, that definitely are earthy. So it's kind of hard. And like I said, I think it really helped me exploring the world of tea and exploring the world of whiskey and coffee and beer, because you start to see sort of common, there's sort of common ground between all of those things. And just when you're focusing on what you're tasting and what you're smelling, and when you're trying to put it into words, and when you're talking about it with other people who are doing the same thing, that's how, like, honestly, that's a better answer than I gave earlier about how to sharpen your palate, is to just talk about it with folks that are doing the same thing, and to try to like clear your mind, clear your head. Make sure you didn't just eat, a bowl of chili or whatever before you're going to drink or smoke whatever you're going to drink or smoke. Have a clean palate. Maybe even keep some sparkling water close by, or I mean, there's times where, especially tasting whiskeys and stuff, pardon me, I will do the coffee beans, like a little cup of coffee beans, and just kind of do that to clear your nasal passages and sort of reset your sniffer. Dark chocolate that's not very sweet is very good palate cleanser. Citrus flavored stuff like lemon sorbet is a common palate cleanser during meals. So there's things you can do like that, but mostly it's about your focus and your attention, and describing what you're feeling. A lot of guys that I talk to that say that they can't really pick up on a lot of notes, it's because they're too focused on listening to what other people are picking up, and that they're not getting that, and they're not focused on what they're picking up and articulating what they're picking up. That's a big problem sometimes.
Hey, Shane, I'm a tinkering around the house with some tobacco blending, and I like what you said about the kind of creating some definitions around those subjective qualities that you're talking about, and things like that. Would that be something like I get an idea, or I get inspired by, like, Old Court, for instance, is one that really pushes me, all the kitchen sinks y'all throw in that one. And would you recommend kind of getting that idea in your head for blending as well, rather than just doing reviews and tasting, but for like your own home blending?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, home blending, like there's almost no point to it if you can't recreate the experience, if you stumble across an experience that you're happy with. So definitely take copious notes about the measurements that you're using, for sure. And also too, like, I got to be honest, I have not done a ton of home blending myself. I've participated in product development at Cornell and Deal several times over the last couple of years, but that's mostly as a palate, not as a person with a lot of blending knowledge. I rely on Jeremy Reeves to be the actual smart guy in the room. But what I was going to say is, in my experience with home blending myself, just for fun, I've done things like, here's the same exact percentages, but this is McClelland Perique versus Cornell and Deal Perique, and I do the same amount of Perique and just see how different it is. Same thing with Virginia, is like, bright Virginia is not a bright Virginia is not a bright Virginia. So if you're using blending components from different manufacturers, that changes things a little bit too. So I think try to control as much of it as you can. Don't change everything about the blend at once, because then you really don't have a frame of reference of what was wrong or what was right in the first place. So you have to be meticulous and take a lot of notes on what you're experiencing as you go. And I think you also have to try the blend in a variety of different pipes, different times of the day, different days of the week. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, I believe this, and a good friend of mine who was a pipe mentor to me told me many years ago that, honestly, you really don't know a tobacco at all until you smoked about a half pound of it. But for practical purposes, 2 ounces / 150 gram tin minimum before you can really pass judgment, or before you really know what's going on there. And of course, that's not always practical. You try a bowl of something, if you're not wild about it right away, you're not going to buy a whole tin. But if you do get a tin of something and you're underwhelmed at first, the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is like jar it up and forget about it for 5 years, because it's going to be so much different when you come back to it, And really, if you come back to it 5 years later and you decide that you like it, you don't know why you like it, because you didn't experience it fully when it was fresh or when it was young. You have to have an understanding of the way that these components are working. And I think that means that, generally speaking, a blend that you love fresh is going to improve, and a blend that you don't like fresh is not likely to change to your taste with aging. So I think home blending is similar in that you have to approach it fairly seriously, even though it's a fun thing, and just make sure that you're not willy-nilly changing things about it, and then deciding one way or the other after a bowl or two.
Cool. Well, I appreciate the advice on that. Yeah, I tell my wife it's real serious work, but I don't know if if she buys it. But I do want to just tack on with what everyone's been saying. I'm really appreciative of what y'all have been doing at Smoking Pipes. Out of all the Amazon stuff, all the stuff we've been ordering, Smoking Pipes has been what the get here on time. I have not missed my normal rotation, and I'm a big fan. Got the pop socket out there for everybody.
Oh man, that's awesome.
I get a lot of questions about the pop socket. Like, what is that? I was like, let me tell you about Smoking Pipes.
Thank you
man,
so
I appreciate
much.
you. Appreciate you and Jeremy. Y'all, both of you, kind of got me motivated into the home blending thing. So and developing my palate on that. So I just wanted to say thanks for that.
Very cool, man. Thanks so much for the kind words. And like I said, I'll pass this along for sure, because everybody that's been at the office, like the shipping department, we had to space everybody out, masks and gloves and everything that we can do. But obviously there's certain people that weren't able to work from home through all of this. So I think they'll definitely appreciate hearing that it's worthwhile. You know what I'm saying? They try their best to get everything out the door the same day. And honestly, it's remarkable that relatively small of a crew, how many packages those guys get out and how accurate those packages are.
Well, it's very much appreciated, I'm sure, by the rest of the pipe club, but I know one pipe smoker that really values what y'all are doing, and keep up the good work, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
It actually happened to
Shane,
me
I got a
once.
question.
It probably will happen to you. Like VU is one of my favorite blends since it came. And when I smoke it, like I like this honey touch when it was maybe 6 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And I smoke like an old teen 4-year-old or something. And I'm not gonna say disappointed, because honey was gone. It's like now I wish it was young, So sometimes I tend to compare like same blend, 6-year-old, whatever, and a brand new, to notice the differences. And in a lot of honey ones, unfortunately disappears. Like in the same one I opened after 6 months, you smoke it right away, you love it. You smoke it 2 weeks later, it's like, where is the honey?
Yeah.
I don't know if it happens to you guys.
Yeah, it happens to me for sure. I think like some of that is like even like really aged tobaccos, like a tin that's been vacuum sealed for like 10 years. A lot of times when I open it up, immediately the smell and the taste is like so sweet. And even the tobacco is not necessarily that dark in color. And then I put it in a jar and a relatively airtight jar, and come back to it a couple weeks later, and the tobacco is like completely black. And the flavor is a lot deeper and a lot richer and a lot less sweet. And I think it's just oxygen. You know what I mean? Like when you have something that's deprived of oxygen for that long, whether it's 6 months or many years, as soon as the oxygen hits it, you've started another reaction that is going to continue to change the tobacco. Sometimes that's really fun. Sometimes I open up a tin and I'm like, yeah, this isn't that great. And then I put it in a jar and come back a couple months later and it's amazing. And then I come back a couple months after that and it's amazing, but in a completely different way. So it's definitely part of the fun, but I've experienced that myself plenty of times, where especially the sweetness and like the lighter notes, like the top end of the spectrum, that kind of stuff can tend to fade, especially with maturity, because everything is more well-rounded. I don't know if anybody here is like an audiophile or like a musician or whatever, but aging tobacco is a lot like compression. You know what I mean? Like you're taking the peaks and the lows and kind of just scrunching them a little bit, so that you have a more well-rounded flavor. And sometimes that causes you to lose certain things. Like honey is a good example that's really prominent and really upfront in a lot of fresh blends that contain honey. And then over the years, it just, or even weeks after you've opened the tin, it's kind of the first thing to go is those real bright notes, in my experience.
Thank you for that. But in this case, it was kind of backwards. It's like, I like the VU younger than older in my cellar.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
That's
Absolutely.
what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
also happens to me on the opposite side with sixpence. I don't really like liquor blends much.
Mm-hmm.
I think they kind of coat while you're smoking. With sixpence, first couple of bowls I smoke, it's like, I don't care. I'll leave it in the jar. 6 months later, it was amazing.
Yep.
So I'll have both sides.
Absolutely. And there's tobaccos too that for me personally, I like them young and I like them aged, but they're almost completely different. Rattray's Old Gowrie or Howl of the Wind are really good examples. And honestly, those are blends that have a pretty decent amount of honey on them as well for the sweetness. And that's about it. There's no other real flavoring there. And the experience of smoking it young is amazing. And the experience of smoking it old is amazing, but they're completely different.
Christian, I'm speaking from Malaysia. So we are around 10,000 pipe smokers strong, and most of them are smoking customers. So I'm forwarding a question. What's currently the 5 most famous blends in smoking pipes currently?
I'm sorry. One more time. The most famous blends.
The 5 most famous
the
blends. The connection is not great.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
you mean
5
for our
most blends.
for our customers or
Yeah.
for us at the company?
Yeah. For customers. Yep.
Well, Lane 1Q is always going to be pretty much number one. That's just one of the most popular pipe tobaccos in America and has been forever. So that one's always there, but I almost feel like I'd never include that because it's kind of a gimme. I think that it's almost easier to go by like style of tobacco than just in general. But Orlik Golden Slice is high on the list. Escudo is high on the list. Something like GLP's Quiet Nights is very high on the list, especially for Latakia blends. I think some of the Peterson X Dunhill blends like 965 and Early Morning Pipe and Nightcap are pretty high up there. Let's see. I can actually tell you. Yeah, I mean, some of the other McBaron blends as well. Scottish Mixture and Virginia Number 1 are pretty high up there. It kind of just depends, and it's a little bit seasonal. But yeah, those are some of the most popular kind of around the clock.
My favorite blend was Dunhill Aperitif. So since it has gone out of production, I don't have any go-to blends right now. So can you recommend me any good Scottish, because I claim a Scottish blend and we aperitif.
Dunhill, which Dunhill was it?
Aperitif. The Elkin,
aperitif. Okay.
Yeah.
Aperitif. That was actually one of the blends that I liked a lot. I liked Aperitif and Durbar quite a bit more than Nightcap and Early Morning, but they were all good. For Aperitif, let me think. Aperitif. For something in the like American style, I guess you could say, as far as English mixtures go, I would say GLP's Chelsea Morning is probably a pretty good thing to try. I mean, the cut is different and the percentages and components are a little bit different, but the feel overall of the blend, that's sort of like, creamy, well balanced, medium. Yeah. Chelsea Morning, I would say, is pretty high on that list for me. Let me take a quick look here and hopefully get another recommendation. You've smoked 965 as well, then, right? Dunhill 965.
Yeah. Yes, but I like the creaminess of aperitif more.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the only other ones that they brought back as a Peterson blend that you might try is Standard Mixture. Have you ever tried Standard Mixture?
Standard Mixture is too mellow for me. I like London Mixture
Too mellow.
more, but
Okay.
it has more spiciness.
Then I would say Rattray's Red Rappery is another pretty good, either Black Mallory or Red Rappery, and then Professional Mixture. Those three from Rattray's I would say are pretty good ones to try too. And I would say that Red Rappery is probably the fullest flavored and spiciest of the three of those. Black Mallory technically usually gets considered a stronger blend because it has more Latakia. But honestly, in my opinion, more Latakia usually means more creaminess and a little bit less nicotine. So I would say Black Mallory is probably technically closer to Aperitif. I would say Professional might be the closest. But I just think that Red Rappery belongs in there because even though it's not maybe as creamy as the other two, it's just a really nice sort of tangy and complex English that's not terribly strong either.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shane, I have another. Oh, wait. Let the other guys go first. You're
Shane,
a popular man tonight.
Shane, this is Aaron from Japan. Greetings.
What's up, Aaron?
How you doing, man?
Trying to find you. There you are. Hey. How's that baby,
Just
by the way?
wanted to, what's that?
How's that baby, by the way?
Oh, doing good, man. Doing good. She's crawling now, and yeah, things
Oh
are
my
good. Man.
God.
Crazy times.
That's awesome.
Uh-oh, speaking of which, the wife is yelling at me right now, so I have to be quiet because it's
You're being too loud. Quiet down.
Sorry. Okay, so sorry. Let me get back to that. One, I was psyched that we now have Shakom number 4 at smokingpipes.com. Like,
yes,
if you remember at the Tokyo show, that like ran out within the first day. So
I do remember it. Honestly, I haven't smoked it since then, but I loved it when I tried it.
I had my coworker bring tin from me from France because I couldn't find it until now. But I'm waiting for my order coming from Smoking Pipes. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying that one again and to putting a couple away for sure.
My question is the same question as always. Like 1792, are we ever going to see it again?
Oh yeah, we had it. When did we have 1792? We had some the last time we had a Sam Gay with shipment, which I want to say was, oh gosh, maybe February-ish. We had some in. The problem with stuff like that, and it's always the problem, is that when the market is sort of starved for a long time, even if we get a large shipment and we put a limit of like 2 or 5 tins or whatever per customer, honestly, it typically takes less than 48 hours for us to sell out. So, and there's like a certain scale within a brand too, like Full Virginia, 1792. There's a handful of blends in the Sam Gay portfolio that sell out immediately, and a handful that we usually have for a couple days. But 1792 is still being made for sure, and we have had it recently. It just doesn't stick around.
Right on. You had a question. I wanted to make sure that you didn't feel like we forgot about you. So after Aaron's done here, just go ahead and jump in.
Sorry, one last thing. So I tried for the dark Kentucky because you recommended that similar to something like 1792. I don't normally buy pouches, and so like when should I start jarring it? Like, I bought 10 some pouches and stuff, but I'm not enjoying it as much as 1792. Like, what point do you start jarring things?
I actually trust the pouches pretty good, particularly the ones made by McBaron and the ones made by Dan Tobacco. So when I buy Salty Dog, the plug, the Dan Tobacco Salty Dog plug, I leave it in the pouch, and I've had no problems coming, at least 2 or 3 years later and opening the pouch and having it be fine. Now, granted, that's also a plug, so it's going to be harder for that to dry out too. I did recently open a pouch of Amphora Original Blend that Brian Levine gave me at the trade show in Germany, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it was fine. I think that it's nice when you open those pouches to move it to a jar immediately, unless you plan on smoking it like in a week. But I think the pouches are actually pretty solid for a pretty good amount of time. If you want to be careful, and if you're actually trying to age these blends and not just have a supply on hand, it's a good idea to just jar them immediately because that's the safest bet. But if it's something you're smoking regularly and you have 3 to 4 or 5 pouches that aren't jarred, I don't think you have to worry for at least a couple years.
Cool, man. Thank you. Rice is in the patty, and hope to get you the next crop sometime in the spring or in the fall.
Awesome, man. Awesome. It's so good.
Take care, Shane. Honestly, awesome, man.
We are talking about obviously right now it's complicated, but I think that we are talking about coming back out to see Ryota sometime in the next, 6 to 10 months, if it's possible. We'll see.
Sweet, man. You got a place to stay here. So.
Oh man, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Look forward to it. Yeah, likewise, man. Take care. Thanks, Shane.
I would like to recommend Aaron, if he likes that. I was impressed, and I'm not a big fan of Amphora. I smoked it when I started aromatics 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And, the Dark Fire Kentucky, it was amazing. First of all, I was surprised for that one. And then for Amir, another one I can recommend you is the Murray's 1862. It's kind of 965 Scottish mixture, so you can try that one as well.
Huh. Thank you, man. Thank you, man.
Alfredo, go ahead and jump in, bro.
With the downhill, I continue with the downhill tobaccos. I start smoking pipe with the downhill at the Murray era, okay, 26 years ago. But the downhill tobacco now, I feel very, very plain. You mean what I know? Some of the mixtures are very equal in flavor. That doesn't happen with the Mora era because the 1965 it's my all-time favorite blend, but with the Mora era, okay. But now the Dunghills and the Petersons are very similar. You know what I mean?
You mean similar to each other?
Yes, I know that it's the receipt or the tobaccos they use in the blend. I don't know, but at the Mura era, they don't have more character. Not now. Yes, the Royal Judge, the Nightcap, the London Mixture at the Mura era are very different than the tobacco now.
I really don't know how to comment on that because I wasn't smoking the Dunhill blends that long ago. But
with the Scandinavic or the Mora era, you smoke the Mora tobacco?
Yes, I have smoked the Murray's era stuff, but like I said, Murray closed down before I was legally able to buy a pipe and tobacco. So I've smoked tins from that era, but they've all been aged. You know what I mean? So when I'm smoking,
because the 1965 had a very nutty flavor, and the Peterson don't have it. It's different. I feel
sure. But yeah, like I said, it's hard for me to say because every time that I've smoked older Dunhills, they've been aging for 10, 20, 30 years. So I have no idea what they were like when they were fresh. But I do. I mean, I have heard from plenty of people that smoked them back in the day that they're different, and that makes sense. But I'm sure all tobacco was different.
I don't know if someone. I don't know if someone has this feeling that I had.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's for me. For me, it's very different. That's the reason that I left.
I've been smoking maybe like from Peterson's. So it just tastes very different. The Dunhill ones, the flavor is very full, and the nicotine can kick you in the head. And this Peterson, I can't feel any nicotine at all, and the flavor is just flat, very flat.
You know, there's one thing, and I've explained this before. So if everybody's okay with me ranting a little bit here, I can tell you with 100% certainty that the Peterson that you're smoking now and the Dunhill that you smoked before are exactly the same. They're exactly the same. I have seen the factory, and everybody likes to argue about, you know, Escudo is slightly different than this, and the old Escudo from 10 years ago used to taste like this. There's a couple things you need to keep in mind. One, tobacco is natural, and it's impossible for the crops to be exactly the same every year. That's just impossible. So what tobacco blenders do is when they're sourcing a new leaf, there could be 3 or 4 or 5 or more different types of Virginia leaf in one blend. And what the tobacco blenders do is they say, okay, we ran out of those 2 types of Virginia. We need to replace them with a newer crop that is similar in characteristic. And in most cases, you can't tell the difference. And a really good blender, honestly, McBaron is a perfect example. McBaron has been making Virginia #1 for decades and decades and decades. It has tasted almost exactly the same that entire time, and it's because they're really good at sourcing replacements for the tobaccos that they run out of. The thing about Dunhill Navy rolls that a lot of people don't understand, and I don't even know if I should be sharing this necessarily, but you know what? It happens. If you smoked Dunhill Navy rolls at any point from 2016 to 2018, you were smoking Dunhill Navy rolls that were made in 2013 or 14. Do you see what I'm saying? So because of the way that production works at a bigger company, they can make enough to supply the entire world for a long time in 1 or 2 runs. And the distributors all over the world, they have their stock sometimes for years. You know what I mean? So I remember there was a guy on one of the forums a couple years ago. He was comparing a tin of Dunhill Navy rolls to another tin of Dunhill Navy rolls, and he was like, "Oh, it used to be this way, and now it's this way." Well, I saw the date codes on the back of those 2 tins, and he was comparing tins that were like 5 years apart in production date. So if you tasted a really rich Dunhill Navy Rolls 2 years ago, it's because it was probably sitting in a tin for 5 years or more by the time you opened it. You know what I mean? So the Peterson blends, they happen to have been made more recently because they brought them back. So they have to have been made more recently. Those will taste the same way in a couple of years. You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind when you're saying that, like, I bought this tin, let's say in a shop locally, and it was dusty and it was sitting there forever. And then you go and you buy that tobacco again online tomorrow and you're like, hey, it's different. Yeah, because it hasn't rested as much, you know? So I think that's a really common thing that people tend to forget, is that tobacco is made to last, have a long shelf life. Obviously, we know that it goes beyond the shelf life and it just gets better and better, like wine. But when you're talking about picking up a tin, depending on where you got it, if you're not looking at the date codes, then you could be smoking something that's actually quite old. And you buy it again, you smoke it immediately, and you have a different experience. So I can tell you with 100% certainty that the Peterson Navy Rolls right now are exactly the same as the Dunhill. It's just a matter of age, honestly.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. I think it's good that you have seen it yourself in the factory, right? Thanks.
Absolutely, and that's what I mean. I'm telling you that because it's good news, you know. But like I said, if you want to have a similar experience, then the best way to do that is to start from smoking the oldest stuff in your cellar and letting the new stuff rest as long as you can.
Shane, I wanted to ask you a question about a tobacco you just reviewed like last week, I think, and that's Rusticas.
Yeah.
So is that, in fact, first question, the strongest tobacco you've ever tried?
No, I don't think so.
Other than a rope, other than a plug or something like.
Other than a rope, does anybody remember that tobacco? I cannot remember the name of it, honestly. It was an Indonesian tobacco that several years ago, a bunch of guys that were on the forums made like group buys, you know, so we could try it. It starts with a T, and I can't remember the exact name. But Scott, you're nodding like
something similar to this.
Let's see. Hold on.
It's from Nadia. Something similar to this.
That I'm not familiar with, but it was, like I said, it was a specific type of tobacco from Indonesia. And actually, I believe that it did contain Rustica leaf in it back then. That was about the strongest that I've ever smoked, ever. Stronger than the ropes. So I think that Rustica is up there, you know, is in terms of strength, it's probably like a 4.5, you know, and I would say that something like Five Brothers or Dark Bird's Eye is about a 4.5. And then to get to a 5 for me in strength, it has to be like Happy Brown Bogey or something like that. So Rustica was a little easier to smoke than you know, Dark Flake Unscented or any of the ropes because it was well-rounded in flavor. The blending was really, really carefully done, and it was really easy to enjoy. But I will say that after I smoked that bowl, when I did that video, it was like 10 in the morning. And after I smoked that bowl, I did not have another pipe the rest of the day. So.
How do you think it will age?
I think it'll age very well because it's not going to change dramatically flavor-wise, I don't think. It's just going to continue to like mellow slightly around the edges. So I think it's going to be more approachable with age, maybe a little smoother and maybe a tiny bit more sweetness. Because those hot pressed Virginias that McBaron does tend to sweeten up quite a bit with age. But I will say that Rustica is not going to change dramatically, I don't think. But it will be good and a little more approachable.
Shane?
Yeah.
I've been smoking for about 20 years now, so I've gotten to where I can pack a pipe pretty well. But I have one pipe I've never been able to, so I want to ask your opinion on how I ought to pack this thing.
Sure. Oh, I have no idea. Actually, you know what might work well for that? I've done it for a handful of like, clay pipes that the cant is so forward that it's nearly straight. The palm method, you know what I'm talking about? Like put a little bit of tobacco in your palm and roll it around in there. I bet that would work for that actually, because it's going to give it a pretty even and a pretty firm pack, which is probably what you need with something like that.
It's just kind of an oddball pipe that I've always wanted to get a smoke out of, and seems like I'm lighting it every 4 seconds. So
Is it a briar?
no, I don't know what it is. Some kind of plastic, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Like the pipe or whatever.
It says Swiss made Pip Star on it.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah.
Tim, can we see that again? I didn't get a look at it. Oh, that is interesting.
I would definitely try this kind of a thing.
It's got a screen on the end that you open and close over the tobacco after you light it. And then it collapses. I don't know if you can see it or not, to push the dottle and ash out.
That is
funny.
interesting.
Tambaluca, yes, the Indonesian blend. That's the tobacco I was talking about. I think that's probably the strongest pipe tobacco I've ever smoked.
I tried to get in on that by one group, and I just didn't make it, because that's what DDR and I were talking about, the Anduo, and I've looked that up, trying to find some straight Anduo to see if I could source some, and I've not been able to find any, because I'd like to know what it tastes like without the blending that Lane does, because I love the Anduo.
I think it's also possible that the Anduo is the Nicotina the Rustica. I think it's probably that varietal that they were using to make that, but they process it similar to Perique, I think is what I remember. But yeah, the Tambaluca was the stuff that a bunch of us were curious to try many years ago, and I would say that was stronger by a hair than like the Happy Brown Bogey and the other ropes.
Gentlemen, we certainly are not rushing anybody out, but this is about the time each week when we can definitely tell that guys are being called away to go back to work and family and whatnot. So over the next 10, 15 minutes, we're going to try to wind down a bit. So if you've got questions that you've been holding on to, want to chat with Shane about anything, now's the time to just jump in there and ask him questions. I know that I've sort of dominated some of the conversation, but I'm going to back off here. Just jump in.
Hey, Shane,
I have a question.
Ooh.
Wait, Zach, you go first.
Go ahead, Bart. Mine's not real important.
Mine isn't either. Go ahead, my friend. I haven't heard you all night.
Shane, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when you're tasting tobaccos and you've smoked half a bowl or 2/3 of a bowl and you feel like your mouth's just painted with flavor, what's the best to reset it as far as like a beverage or something, just to kind of freshen it up? I found like water, not so much, coffee, not so much, but
a lot of people like sparkling water for that reason.
Okay.
I personally, and it's super silly, but I personally just hate sparkling water. I just never drink it at all. I don't find it refreshing for some reason. So if I'm not drinking room temperature water to clear my palate, I'm probably drinking tea. I find that tea, depending on the type of it, as long as it's not, if you're not adding a lot of honey or sugar or anything like that, I find that a lot of black teas are a little bit better of a palate cleanser than like a coffee is. Mostly because the bitterness, it's more bitter, but it's also less acidic. I think the acidity in a lot of coffee tends to sort of fry your palate rather than reset it. So I think black tea unsweetened is a great way to do it. Maybe a little bit of lemon in there at the most. I also think that the right beer can actually be pretty good too. Not something super hoppy, but like a Pilsner or a lager of some kind can be a pretty good palate cleanser. And honestly though, and I think that some people are surprised when I say this, but I am usually not pairing a tobacco with a beverage. I do on occasion for sure, but usually I don't. And I try to space out whether I'm having a cigar or a pipe, just not right after a meal necessarily. In certain social settings, especially if it's something that I'm familiar with smoking, I have no problem lighting up right after a meal. But I think that for me, the best palate cleanser is just not consuming anything for 30 minutes or so. And honestly too, I think if you're smoking a pipe and you really need to like rest your palate, putting the pipe down and coming back to it in 15 or 20 minutes also tends to help. But I would say if it's not water or black tea, then I'm probably drinking like a Coors Banquet or a Yingling or something like that. Honestly,
that's why I'm asking, because sometimes you get halfway down and you have a couple sips of a lighter beer like that, and it's like a brand new pipe again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was curious if anything else can do that. So thank you.
I also think that one thing that pairs well with almost anything I've ever smoked is like an old fashioned. You know what I mean? Like a simple whiskey cocktail, like an old fashioned or a Manhattan, maybe even a whiskey sour if it's made correctly and not with sour mix, which it should never be. So simple whiskey cocktails, I think, because there's a little bit of sweetness to them and often some citrus flavor. They tend to work really well with almost anything cigar or pipe wise.
Thank you.
Shane, first off, thank you for giving me an excuse to drink beer while I smoke a pipe. That's good to know. Now you can say that somebody who's actually knowledgeable in the craft told me that this was a good idea. So I will definitely
it's a
let
great
my
idea.
wife know. So thanks for that. I'll show others on YouTube saying, listen, this dude is saying that I should drink a beer with my pipe.
Yeah, absolutely.
All kidding aside, I have a question that I asked our former speaker as well. And since you're quite a young fellow like me, I'm very interested in how you see the future of pipe smoking, because it's when I first got into it, I thought it was a bit of an old man's hobby. Well, this is clearly proven that it's not the fact, although I do respect the older gentlemen in this room, of course. But I'm just curious on how you see the future of pipe smoking, because at least where I'm looking at, it's getting less and less popular, and it's a very niche kind of spectrum of the smoking community. Like cigars are very big here, but pipe smoking is almost non-existent. And I'm just curious where you think it's going in the next 20 or 30 years.
Well, the pipe market is definitely niche. It's definitely small. But speaking strictly from smokingpipes.com, I can say that over the last 20 years, the least amount of growth that we've seen in a year is like 15%, which is really high, compared to most other industries. And honestly, when I started 6 years ago, I would say that the biggest demographic was still probably somewhere from 50 to 70 years old of our customers. And over the past 5 years, that has creeped down to people in their 30s is like probably our biggest demographic these days. Now I think that that's probably because a lot of older pipe smokers, they're set, they have enough of what they need, kind of a thing, and a lot of younger guys are getting into it and building up their collection and building up their cellar. So we definitely see more of the younger guys being really, really active because they need to build up their collections, right? But aside from that, I think that we are in the golden age here and like a real renaissance of pipe smoking. And it really just started. Maybe about 10, 15 years ago, started taking off because what we had before was sort of like the remnants of a once huge industry and huge hobby. And it's really started to take off in the last 10 or 15 years, partly because information on the internet has been easier to come by for everybody. So it's spread, with like sort of the decline in pipe smoking against the cigar boom in the 80s and 90s. And the culture of hanging out at cigar shops and pipe shops has sort of changed dramatically. I don't know that I would say it's gone or decreased, but it has changed. And a lot of cigar shops don't have a good selection of pipes, that kind of thing over the last 20 years. A lot of them are getting better now because people are interested in it. But I think that the internet helps a lot because it gave a lot of younger people who were interested in it a way to learn this. Whereas back in the day, it was so common and even passed down from like father to son that it was less of a closely guarded secret, than it is now. I think that the demand is definitely there, and I think that the younger generation, there's a couple of good things about the younger generation, just a couple that I would say that I'm definitely guilty of. One, we tend to get pretty excited and pretty enthralled in our new hobbies right out of the gate. So whereas before, going by your local pipe shop a couple times a month or whatever, it could take you a pretty significant amount of time to sort of graduate, from tiers and tiers and tiers of knowledge and collecting. And now, since everything is at your fingertips on the internet, and since there's things like this that we're participating in now, it's really easy for younger guys to really, really quickly get a hold of and get a feel for the hobby and the community, and to take it really quickly, take it by the horns really quickly. So I think that the demand there is high. I think that a lot of people that are interested in pipes are also interested in other craft, really well-made boots, really well-made leather goods, craft beer, really, really good quality foods that are sourced locally. So this sort of resurgence in the interest in the interest at large of craft and high quality, handmade, American-made, locally made goods, that helps the movement a lot too. And I think that there's a big chunk of people now that are more interested in quality and supporting local artisans and stuff like that than we had in years past. I mean, it's kind of it's definitely a generational thing. I think that at a certain point, just business growing organically across many industries does something to a craft or a hobby. A lot of times convenience is a really big factor when you look at the progression of things like automobiles and kitchen appliances and stuff. But everybody these days that is interested in something like pipes, they are typically interested in the uniqueness of the product because it's a natural made product, the artisan who created that product or the factory of artisans who created that product. And it's sort of just like a return to our roots as consumers, for lack of a better term. So I think that the demand is there, but more importantly, the demand for quality and the demand for interesting and genuine products is there. And I think that whenever that's true, and it's not just about the cheapest thing possible or the most convenient thing possible, when people are really interested in quality and integrity and stuff like that, it's good for an industry. And even a little industry like ours, I think there's a lot of room for it to continue to grow and for us to continue to see a lot of really interesting products and fresh takes on classic designs and pipes and stuff like that. I think that the future is bright for pipe smokers for sure.
That's good to
Shane,
know.
what would you
I
say-
appreciate your answer.
Yeah, Shane, just from the market research that Smoking Pipes has done, what would you estimate the worldwide, the size of the worldwide market in pipes it would be?
I have no idea. So we have our own data, of course, but I will say that very few other people in the industry collect data at all. Definitely not as diligently as we would like to see industry wide. So I've heard some figures based on like reverse engineering the amount of tobacco that was sold in certain markets and stuff like that. Pardon me. I really don't know for sure, but it's bigger than you might expect, first of all. And it's got to be, I would say that it's definitely not tens of millions, but it's got to be a couple million at least worldwide. Just a guess.
I was just curious, I'm following a lot of conversations on social media within the pipe enthusiast community. And it ranges. Like I was reading a post the other day where somebody said, I think there's only 2,000 people in the world who do pipe smoking. I'm like, no, that you couldn't sustain an industry with that few customers.
No,
but I'm
not possible.
To know that it's in the millions. That's actually pretty cool, man.
Well, I mean, like I said, just the American market alone, it has to be. Just the American market alone has to be in the hundreds of thousands, actually. So 2,000, absolutely not. There's
before we wrap up, I do want to do another plug for all of the people who are here who have not yet come over to the Facebook group, the Virtual Pipe Club, and sort of signed up as a member there. I mean, it's not like an official thing at all, but I do often try to take advantage of being able to message you guys. A lot of you guys got my message last night about a reminder here, and sometimes we do tobacco alerts if something just comes on, line of TurboTin says, this tobacco is suddenly available again. So if you haven't already done so, please come on over and just join the group so that, we can stay in touch and whatnot. You don't have to at all, but it will just make me personally very happy. And that's all, I would say about that. Maybe another couple of questions and then we'll let Shane go. So whatever you guys want to know, just jump in and ask him.
I have a little bit of a plug to give here. For all of you guys that maybe don't know about it, it's new to me. If you're hunting for a substitute for an old boy lighter, I just picked this up. It's called 4th Generation. Maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah,
they are a great little lighter. I just got it. It's about $50. It feels like a good quality piece and it works really well.
Hey Shane, one small question. I don't know if you have ever tasted Daniel Elizabeth, but I found the brick inside there is very flavorful and very bitter that I cannot find in any other blends with brick. Do you have any?
You said Elizabethan mixture?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, and what was the actual question? Any blends with Perique that are similar?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think Elizabethan, even though I would say it's a little more bright and a little more citrusy, I think Escudo is definitely one that you should try. Peter Stokeby Luxury Bullseye along the same lines for those kind of like fuller Perique blends. Haddo's Delight by Greg Peace is definitely on the stronger side than either of those. But that kind of gives you an idea of like maybe the ceiling of how much Perique you're interested in. It's not a huge percentage. There are definitely blends in the Cornell and Deal line that have more Perique than that. But I would recommend trying Haddo's Delight to see if that's too much for you. But yeah, Escudo is a great place to start. Let me think. What else? Dunhill Dark Flake was fantastic too, and I've heard that Peterson will be bringing that one back. So when that is available again, if you haven't tried the Dunhill version, try the Peterson version. Dark Flake is fantastic. It's a little more stoved and a little less bright, but still pretty close. I think that also Savinelli de Blonde d'Oro is a very good one to try. There's a little bit of dark fired in there, so it's a little more spicy. But honestly, especially when it's fresh, it rings a similar bell that Elizabethan does. It's a little citrusy, a little zesty, and not just spicy.
I can help with another one because I'm a big vapor fan. The closest one to me to Elizabethan, because it's so astringent, and I don't care for Elizabethan period. It's Stratford.
Stratford is a good one.
Bayou Morning Flake is another one that is exactly like that. Those two are amazing. And if you want to try something sweeter, which is my favorite, Fillmore.
Yeah.
It's probably the best vapor that you can buy on those ones.
Yeah, very good suggestions. Yeah, Stratford was originally designed, I think, to be a replacement for Elizabethan, or at least to have the same feel. So yeah, that's definitely a good one. I would also just say that minus the Perique, everything in the Fog City collection by Greg is really good, but Embarcadero is my favorite. Maybe my favorite peace blend in general, but definitely worth checking out.
So Shane,
and actually this too, of course.
Can I into that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Particularly, sorry, David. I had that one long time ago, and I like the Scottish cake. Yeah, that
Red Virginia.
I bought the Scottish mixer, the Scottish cake, because I love vapors again.
Mm-hmm.
I bought that one, and I'm sorry, but it tasted like strawberries and I don't know, raspberries or something. I don't know if that thing was poison or something, or am I the only crazy one who got that flavor there?
No, I think that when it's fresh, it's definitely has a lot of sweetness to it. And like I said, it's similar to like when you say berries and stuff, I think of Peterson University Flake or Dunhill 3-year matured Virginia. Those kind of like really you know, fruity but not necessarily citrusy sort of blends. But I mean, this is old, of course, so it's different. But after some time in the tin, it's just a really rich and more spicy. It's the least spicy, I think, of the Scottish cake, Scottish flake blends. But I do think that the Red Virginia is good, but I typically tend to enjoy it more when it's been resting for a while. So, but Scottish flake and Scottish cake, I smoke them 1 month old, 10 years old, 20 years old, doesn't matter. They're amazing.
All right, last question for you, because I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and especially yours.
Oh, no worries.
Will you consider coming back and talking to us again and let us pick your brain about other stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
I'm hoping that we can bring you back before sooner than later.
Sure.
I'll just speak for the group and saying it's been amazing to have you be our guest and hang out with us. This has been an amazing group of guys who often bring some fantastic questions, obviously a lot of experience as pipe smokers, and even some of the, you know, like Bart, who is newer to the pipe smoking, but he has a sort of a freshness about his perceptions on this. So this is a fantastic group, I'll just say, and thank you for being a part of it today.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for the invite. It was a lot of fun. Honestly, 2 hours flew by. So yeah, I clearly have no problem talking about tobaccos all day long, and I'd be happy to join you guys again sometime. It was a blast.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I'd like to spend, you know, more hangout time with you myself.
Yeah, next time I'll make sure that I have more than one pipe ready to go, because I probably could have used the second one.
And there we go. Well, gentlemen, thank you once again. A couple things just to remember. If you haven't gotten into joining the Virtual Pipe Club over there on the Facebook page, please go do that. And also, like, take a look at the pipe swap. If you've got some pipes, you're just like, I just need to get rid of this pipe and see if I can find something new. This is quite an across the board group of guys who might have something that would be really good additions to your collection. So so try it out. Let's all go. And once again, for everybody, especially in the States, but across the world, happy Mother's Day tomorrow. May you have a wonderful day with your partners, your moms. I know of several of you who've got little rugrats running around, so that's a blessing, and you know, got to give props to the mom who made that happen. Have a great week, and Shane, thank you.
Real quick before we sign off, I had an idea. We'll have to think carefully about it, because for the international guys it might be a little complicated. But maybe next time, ahead of time, I can do something like one of these old tins that I've got, break them up and send out samples to everybody, so that we can actually like smoke the same thing and try it out together and kind of talk about what it's like. And yeah, more like we would be able to if it was an actual pipe show. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We've been kicking around that idea, and some of the guys have already started to do that. And I'm glad to hear you say that, because that would be amazing. That'd be just
I'll dig deep and I'll find something interesting, and we'll smoke some old English capstan or some old rat trays in Scotland or something like that.
Awesome.
Hey, how about he send it to everybody and then we do the mystery review?
There we go.
That's one, the aromatic with Sunday picnic that he get caught.
See, this is the thing. You could have a whole new show, Shane. You have the International Mystery Review.
We'll see how interesting it is for everybody that will never taste the 30-year-old tobacco.
Fantastic. All right, guys, take care. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Have a great night, guys.
Awesome meeting.
Okay.
Bye now.